crucial two-day visit. The Prime Minister, post upon landing, says that he's looking forward to meeting with President Trump and building on a strategic partnership for the ties between the two nations. Prime Minister Modi and President Trump's crucial bilateral meeting coming up in a few hours from now. This is the first meeting taking place between the two leaders ever since Trump took office, and he's the fourth leader to meet with Donald Trump. Key announcement from the White House: President Trump to sign orders on reciprocal tariffs. White House says that the order may take place ahead of the meeting between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi. US President Donald Trump sets the ball rolling to fulfill another one of his campaign promises, speaks to both Russian President Putin as well as Ukrainian leader Zelensky. Moscow issues a statement saying that they agree with Trump that a long-term settlement could be reached through peaceful negotiations. US Defense Secretary has said that Ukraine cannot expect NATO membership and return to old borders. And former US Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard has been confirmed as the new Director of National Intelligence. The Senate approved her nomination in a 52-48 vote, largely along the party lines, and she also met with Prime Minister Modi. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio will travel to Europe and the Middle East from the 13th to the 18th. Rubio will be making stops in Germany, Israel, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. A very good morning. You're watching NDTV World. Let's get to our top story. That's Prime Minister Modi, who landed in Washington, D.C. just a few hours ago, is set to be meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump in Washington later today, marking Prime Minister Modi's first bilateral visit to the United States since Trump's second term began. The meeting aims to strengthen India-U.S. strategic ties, focusing on trade, defense and energy cooperation. This visit highlights the essence of the partnership between the two nations. Discussions expected to cover mutual interests such as technology as well as security of Indo-Pacific region, among others. Prime Minister Modi's visit to the White House comes as Mr. Trump is in the fourth week of his second presidency since his inauguration. He has met only Israel's Prime Minister, followed by Japan's Prime Minister and Jordan's King. One key issue that may be discussed during Mr. Modi's visit is the humane treatment of the Indian deportees. Of course, Prime Minister Modi arrived in Washington, D.C. and he also met with U.S. Intel Chief Tulsi Gabbard. And also the meeting between the two leaders comes amid heightened tensions surrounding Trump's trade tariffs on several countries, his controversial Gaza peace plan and his ongoing mass deportation of illegal immigrants. And we have Alistair joining us all the way from Washington, D.C. She has, in fact, spoken with the Indian diaspora as well as how important it is as far as the significance of the meeting of Prime Minister Modi. Let's listen in.
Looking ahead to Prime Minister Modi's visit here to Washington, D.C. as he meets with President Donald Trump, I'm joined by Surjan Palkar. He's with one of the United States' most prominent think tanks, the Atlantic Council. Thanks very much for joining us here, Surjan.
Alistair, thank you for having me.
Most welcome. Now, Surjan, we know that Donald Trump has been on this trade tariff rampage, targeting Mexico, Canada, China. What can Narendra Modi really do in order to make sure that India doesn't face those punishing tariffs? There's going to be some give and take. What will India give and what will the United States likely take?
It depends to be seen what concessions the Prime Minister offers the President. We have some background on this through the first term as well, and in the patterns that we have seen with President Trump's dealings with his neighboring countries. It's quite apparent that he will play hardball, but as we've seen, the Prime Minister is coming with some tariff concessions. I presume that the Prime Minister's team will be ready with their comebacks on the steel and aluminium tariffs that are being planned, and why, if India should get exemptions in that regard.
If there was one trump card, so to speak, that Narendra Modi has in terms of the give factor, would you think purchasing of defense equipment might be one of them, perhaps?
Absolutely. I think if President Trump raises the trade surplus or deficit, depending on how you look at it, with the Prime Minister can absolutely offer defense equipment procurement as an alternative to bridge that gap. I will say that it's not a huge gap, but given President Trump's preference on trade, it's likely to be a point of discussion for sure.
What are the other things that we would likely see that would please President Trump to possibly think that, okay, I am happy with what India is offering, and maybe let's not go ahead with those tariffs, though he's repeatedly called India in the past a tariff king?
Absolutely. We should remember that this is a huge opportunity for big wins on both sides as well. Unlike with a lot of other countries, India and the US do not have a free trade agreement. That was started in the first Trump administration, the discussions. Now there is a big opportunity to get a free trade agreement and have a mini FTA or a solid FTA come together in the next year or so.
So do you think that materializing this time around, like just for our viewers' memory, they tried to do that the previous time around when in Trump 1.0, and you think that that might be possible now when with Trump back in the White House?
They would want to revive it, and in my analysis, I would say that they should want to revive it. I think a US-India trade agreement is a long time coming.
So where's the stumbling block? On the US side, on the India side?
I don't know if it's a stumbling block. It wasn't pursued under the Biden administration, probably due to differing priorities, and was a priority in the later part of the first Trump administration. So I can absolutely see it being a revived priority for US-India bilateral in this second administration.
You've put out a column, an opinion piece on the Atlantic Council website where you've written about the Modi-Trump visit. You've said that this is no time for complacency between for India when it comes to dealing with President Trump. What do you mean by that?
Well, I will give India credit and say that it's not being complacent already. You've seen the foreign minister here twice already, in December and in January. Prime Minister Modi is about to be one of the first leaders to meet with the president. And so far, India has avoided having any hard actions against it from the US. So India is already not being complacent in its actions. And something that I haven't mentioned in the column is that unlike a lot of countries, India, from a domestic perspective, Prime Minister Modi is operating from a measure of strength. The next state elections are about 8 to 9 months away. So domestically, the Prime Minister has good bandwidth to prioritize US-India relations and foreign policy in that regard.
Trump has a tendency of surprising the world. Everyone talks about his camaraderie with Narendra Modi. Do you think that continues this time around very quickly? Or do you think that perhaps that might change? He might, play real hardball?
I think the camaraderie will probably be helpful in coming to the table. If we look at the pattern, the president has separated his camaraderie and his policy actions. But at the very least, if those policy actions are played hard, the camaraderie should be helpful in the two sides coming together in conversation.
Sujan Palkar with the Atlantic Council, thank you very much for joining us here.
Thank you so much.
Congressman Bera, thank you very much for having us here in your office. Now, you've been in office for the last 10 years, been on Capitol Hill. You've seen Narendra Modi meet President Barack Obama. You've seen him meet President Biden, President Trump the first term, and now the second term. How do you think things stand between India and the US this time around?
Over the 13 years I've been in Congress, you've seen the evolution of the US-India relationship. I think this relationship between the two countries is as strong as ever. And you've seen that in Democratic and Republican administrations. Obviously, President Trump is taking a different approach in his first couple of weeks here. I do think, though, there are real opportunities for the U.S. and India to work together.
Do you think that India will eventually get caught in Trump's tariff crosshairs?
Well, it seems like Prime Minister Modi is being proactive here, lowering some tariffs. But the tariff discrepancy between U.S. goods going to India or India goods coming to the United States is pretty large. So I think it's smart that the Prime Minister is taking some proactive steps, but that'll be the negotiation that takes place.
Yeah, he has offered some kind of concessions and sweeteners, but just wondering, do you think that India might become a casualty, a collateral, if the U.S. and President Trump slaps tariffs and say BRIC countries and so on and so forth, that India just can't get away from that?
I think every country seems to be getting caught in the crosshairs, including our closest trading partners, Mexico and Canada. So I don't think it's a good game to guess what President Trump is going to do. That said, I do think the U.S.-India economic relationship. I think India's strategic. If President Trump goes after the pharmaceutical sector, India might be able to step in and say, hey, we have an ability to fill some of that gap if you want to move away from China. So I think this will be a delicate balance.
We've always talked about, and people comment about, President Trump and Narendra Modi having this camaraderie that kind of will pull them through to all kinds of obstacles. Do you think that's going to work this time around? Are we going to see quite a belligerent Trump, even when it comes to India, perhaps, in the second term?
Yeah, I think they have a good, cordial relationship. Obviously, the fact that on day one you saw a Quad meeting and Jay Shankar was here. So I think that portends that the administration recognizes the importance of this relationship. I also think there's a real opportunity for India. I suspect President Trump will try to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. That's going to require negotiations with Putin and Russia. India does have lines of communication that the United States may not have, and I think this is a place where India's diplomacy could step up and say, okay, as this deal's being negotiated, when it comes to a conclusion, where does Russia stand? And it's not in our interest, the United States, or India's interest for a strong Russia-China relationship. So how do you bring Russia back over towards the West?
So using India to offer that kind of leverage with Putin?
Well, I would hope so. I would hope this is a chance for India as a developed nation, as a leading nation, to take its stage on the diplomatic stage.
Right. Congressman Bear, I don't know if you've seen these pictures, and you likely have, of Indian deportees recently, 104 of them being sent back to India from the United States. They were in chains and shackles. Outrage in India. They were sent in a military aircraft. We were told by our External Affairs Minister that that's the SOP, the standard operating procedure. But what was it like during Biden's term or Obama's term? Because deportees have been sent during that time as well.
Yeah, you didn't use military planes, you used ICE planes, you treated people in a humane way. There's no need to shackle deportees, put them in handcuffs. They're already on their way back to their home countries. So treat these individuals as human beings. So I do think that's outrageous.
There's speculation that this will come up in talks between Trump and Narendra Modi. Do you think there'll be some kind of compromise made on that front, that we won't see these pictures of this kind of treatment for deportees coming from the US?
I would hope so. I would hope that the Prime Minister raises it. Again, these are human beings. Let's treat them as human beings.
Final question here. I want to talk about Trump's decision with regards to ending birthright citizenship. It kind of rings home to a lot of people on H-1B visas, because ending birthright citizenship, according to that executive order from Trump, affects not just illegal immigrants, but also people here on temporary work permits, so parents who potentially are expecting a baby. What are you hearing on that front, especially from California, where you're from?
We're going to fight this tooth and nail. We think it's unconstitutional. The courts have ruled in our favor, saying, birthright citizenship is in the Constitution. So I think it would be devastating, not just to the Indian American community, but also to communities and precedents for the last 100 years.
And what all can we expect out of this visit, this very significant visit of Prime Minister Modi, who landed in Washington, D.C. a few hours back? He's also met with Tulsi Gabbard. Let's get you details of what all is on the agenda.
A dialogue of democracies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has landed in Washington, D.C. for what is expected to be a historic U.S. visit. PM Modi will be meeting U.S. President Donald Trump for the first in the latter's second term, becoming the fourth leader after Israeli Prime Minister, Japanese leader, and Jordan's king to meet Trump. The high-profile visit started with the U.S. intelligence chief Tulsi Gabbard meeting PM Modi just hours after being confirmed for the coveted post. So what's on the agenda in this highly anticipated meeting between the two leaders? And how will the Trump-Modi bonhomie benefit India? One of the key issues on the agenda will be immigration. The Prime Minister will be in Washington days after President Trump deported 104 Indian nationals who entered the US illegally. Furthermore, the issue of the prized H-1B visa created a furor in the US in the early days of Trump's second term. The other highlight of the visit could be talks on the impending reciprocal tariffs that the US has warned could be announced any moment.
I do believe it will come before the Prime Minister's visit tomorrow, and I will let the President discuss the details on the reciprocal tariff front. But this is something he believes strongly in, and it's very simple logic as to why the President wants to impose reciprocal tariffs. It's the golden rule, which we all learned when we were growing up in school. Treat others the way you want to be treated, and far too many nations around this world have been ripping off the United States of America for far too long, and that's why the President believes this will be a great policy that will benefit American workers and improve our national security.
Analysts have warned that such levies could bring a broad tariff hike to emerging market economies like India and Thailand. Other key topics on the agenda can include defense purchases, civil nuclear cooperation, and security issues, including China's rising influence in the Indo-Pacific. With Donald Trump on a spree of signing one executive order after the other, India awaits what the 78-year-old's next move would be. Bureau Report for NDTV World.
And staying with news of the United States, it's the President Donald Trump who has spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the phone and agreed to start talks to end the war between Russia and Ukraine. In an extraordinary thaw in relations that could leave Kiev out in the cold, Trump described the call as lengthy and highly productive. He also used common sense, something that he has been using during his campaign. He also, the conversation lasted for about an hour and a half, of course, addressing the deep tension since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The Kremlin said that the call was very lengthy and that Putin and Trump had agreed that the time had come to work together. Zelensky said that he had discussed opportunities to achieve peace in a meaningful call with Trump during the U.S. president had shared also details of the conversation that he had with Putin.
No, we had a great call, and it lasted for a long time, over an hour this morning. I also had with President Zelensky a very good call after that. And I think we're on the way to getting peace. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace. I just want to see people stop getting killed. But we'll get it. I think we'll get it. We'll get something done. We're going to be meeting. Actually, tomorrow they're meeting in Munich, as you know, and we're going to have some other meetings. And I'll be dealing with President Putin largely on the phone, and we ultimately expect to meet. In fact, we expect that he'll come here and I'll go there, and we're going to meet also probably in Saudi Arabia the first time. We'll meet in Saudi Arabia, see if we can get something done. But we want to end that war. That war is a disaster. It's a really bloody, horrible war.
Vladimir Putin said that he does see it as a possibility for this conflict in Ukraine to end as a result of peace talks, but he said that could only be achieved if the root causes of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine are recognized by the international community. And we know that the two main reasons, which have been voiced both by President Vladimir Putin and by Foreign Minister Lavrov, is NATO's expansion to the east and a series of laws passed recently in Ukraine, which Moscow sees as a derogatory against ethnic Russians and Russian speakers in Ukraine. We know also that Vladimir Putin invited Donald Trump to Moscow with his team. Of course, we don't know any dates yet, but another positive sign and a signal for the relations between the two countries, and the two leaders also agreed to continue with their contacts. Now, Donald Trump later also spoke with Vladimir Zelensky and said that he had a fruitful conversation with him. We also heard the same reaction from Vladimir Zelensky as well. But given the context of everything else that was said today and everything else that happened today, frankly, I wouldn't expect Mr. Zelensky to be in a very positive mood, because the American chief of the Pentagon, the new chief of the Pentagon, went to Europe today, met with the NATO countries at the NATO headquarters, and said that Washington doesn't see it as something realistic for Ukraine to return to its 2014 borders. Prior to all the military action in Ukraine, and most importantly, prior to Crimea, which kind of sounds that Washington is ready to recognize Crimea as a part of Russia, which is something very interesting to come out of the lips of the new chief of the Pentagon, because it completely goes against everything that was earlier said by the previous EU administration.
And with that, we're slipping to a very short break. On the other side, we'll get you U.S. Secretary of Defense saying that the war between Russia and Ukraine must end. Stay with us.
Big budget day. Big newsmakers on NDTV. Top ministers and opposition leaders.
ये by the people, of the people and for the people budget.
It is a fulfilling budget.
This is a development budget.
It's one of the finest budgets I've ever seen.
More than a bold move, it is a clever move.
NDTV, always the first choice of newsmakers. NDTV keeps you ahead. Mahakumbh, the festival of faith, the world's biggest spiritual festival, the divine dip at the spiritual Sangam, a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
As India accelerates its growth towards self-reliance, India Inc. is leading the charge. From market dominance to manufacturing, from AI breakthroughs to disruptive innovations, India is setting the roadmap for a Viksit Bharat. Join us as business leaders, policymakers and ministers come together at the NDTV Profit Conclave 2025, the blueprint for Viksit Bharat, February 18th, 10 a.m. onwards. Tune in only on the NDTV network.
Trump 2.0 in the White House. Prime Minister Modi amongst the first invitees. Recognition of a rising India. February 13th, Prime Minister Modi in the US. India-US Dostana, a force for good. Talks on ties, trade and tariffs. A dialogue of democracies.
हमारी मित्रता आगे बढ़ती चली जा रही है.
Deal, dosti and diplomacy. Live coverage on NDTV from Washington.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of Maximum City is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring
in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
Big budget day. Big newsmakers on NDTV. Top ministers and opposition leaders.
ये by the people, of the people and for the people budget.
It is a fulfilling budget.
This is a development budget.
Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth has said that the war between Russia and Ukraine must end and Kiev joining NATO is unrealistic. Hegseth mentioned that the United States will no longer prioritize European and Ukrainian security as the Trump administration shifts its attention to securing the United States' own borders and deterring the war with China. In remarks before a meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, Hegseth said that European troops should be the primary force securing a post-war Ukraine. Now, something that the United States troops will not be involved in. Former U.S. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard has been confirmed as the new director of National Intelligence. The Senate approved her nomination in a 52-48 vote, largely along party lines. The only Republican to vote against her was former Senate leader Mitch McConnell. At 43, Gabbard has no prior intelligence experience. She's never really worked in a spy agency or served on an intelligence committee during her 4 terms in the House. But she will now oversee the entire United States intelligence community, managing an annual budget of nearly $100 billion. And with that, we're slipping to a short break. Back with a whole lot more. Stay with us.
Mahakumbh, the festival of faith. The world's biggest spiritual festival. The divine dip and the spiritual sangam. A sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
As India accelerates its growth towards self-reliance, India Inc. is leading the charge. From market dominance to manufacturing, from AI breakthroughs to disruptive innovations, India is setting the roadmap for a Viksit Bharat. Join us as business leaders, policymakers and ministers come together at the NDTV Profit Conclave 2025, the blueprint for Viksit Bharat, February 18th, 10 a.m. onwards. Tune in only on the NDTV network.
Trump 2.0 in the White House. Prime Minister Modi amongst the first invitees. Recognition of a rising India. February 13th, Prime Minister Modi in the US. India-US Dostana, a force for good. Talks on ties, trade and tariffs. A dialogue of democracies.
हमारी मित्रता आगे बढ़ती चली जा रही है.
Deal, dosti and diplomacy. Live coverage on NDTV from Washington.
I've been reporting on all issues, big and small, from Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, rest of South India, bringing you all the action, all that you need to know, all that you want to know.
The energy of maximum city is infectious. I bring in that energy in our news coverage from financial capital Mumbai.
Covering from the southernmost part of India over the last 23 years, I bring in-depth and 360-degree coverage from the Dravidian heartland.
The land of Mishti is also known for its bitter politics. I have seen much water flow under the Howrah Bridge, covering Bengal in all its vivid colors.
Big budget day. Big newsmakers on NDTV. top ministers and opposition leaders.
ये by the people, of the people and for the people budget.
It is a fulfilling budget. This is a development budget.
It's one of the finest budgets I've ever seen.
More than a bold move, it is a clever move.
NDTV, always the first choice of newsmakers. NDTV keeps you ahead. Mahakumbh, the festival of faith, the world's biggest spiritual festival, the divine dip and the spiritual sangam, a sacred confluence of faith, culture and heritage. NDTV's mega coverage of the Mega Fest. NDTV at Mahakumbh 2025.
Good morning. You're watching The Breakfast Show on NDTV with me, Tanima Biswas. Prime Minister Modi is in Washington, D.C. In fact, he's just landed a short while back for a crucial bilateral meeting with President Trump. My colleague and senior managing editor of NDTV 24/7, Nikunj Garg, joins us live from Washington. Nikunj.
Well, yes, Tanima, and as always, the Prime Minister hit the ground running. Moments after landing into the snowed-out capital of the United States of America, he had a very crucial meeting with the Director of National Intelligence, United States of America. And that meeting is very, very crucial, and we will be going ahead and explaining to our viewers why that meeting is so crucial at this juncture, and why did the Prime Minister begin his tour with a meeting with the Director of National Intelligence. Back to you.
Right. We'll, of course, be covering all those aspects with Nikunj Garg. But first up, let's take a look at the headlines on top of 8 a.m. Prime Minister Modi in United States set for a key bilateral meeting with President Trump, the first such meeting between India and the US just a month after Trump took charge for the second time as the US president. Prime Minister Modi and President Trump meeting, a key milestone in strengthening US-India ties. PM Modi, the fourth foreign leader to be hosted by Donald Trump in his second term so far. Immigration, trade, tariffs, strategic deals on defense and energy, key issues which are likely to figure in the US-India talks. And a key announcement from the White House, President Donald Trump to sign order on reciprocal tariffs. White House says that the order may even take place ahead of the Modi-Trump meeting. And Prime Minister Modi hits the ground running. First meeting that he held just a short while back was with US Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. Discussions focused on enhancing intelligence cooperation and counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and emerging threats. And our big international headline, US President Donald Trump sets the ball rolling to fulfill another one of his campaign promises, speaks to both Russian President Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Moscow issues statements saying they agree with Trump that a long-term settlement could be reached through peace negotiations. And the first part of the budget session ends today. Income tax bill to be tabled in the Lok Sabha. JPC report on Waqf also likely to be tabled. Our top focus, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just landed in Washington, D.C. a short while back and is set to meet with US President Donald Trump in Washington, D.C. later today. This marks Prime Minister Modi's first bilateral visit to the US since Trump's second term began. The meeting aims to strengthen India-US strategic ties, focusing on trade, defense, and energy cooperation. It also underscores the importance of the India-US partnership, with discussions also expected to cover mutual interests such as technology and security of the Indo-Pacific region. Nikunj Garg now joins us live from Washington, D.C. Nikunj, as you were mentioning, that the Prime Minister in a way hit the ground running as soon as he landed in Washington, D.C. And the first meeting, we have got pictures of that also coming in, of course, was with Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence in the United States. So talk us through the pictures as to what's the significance of this particular meeting held by Prime Minister Modi.
Well, there is a very strong reason why the Prime Minister started his itinerary the way he did. And that reason is that currently we are in the midst of an extremely important deportation or extradition, call what you may, between India and the United States of America. Tahavur Hussain Rana, the key Mumbai 2611 accused, whose extradition to India has finally been cleared by the United States Supreme Court. His fate hangs in balance. For the last 2 weeks, the National Investigation Agency back in India has prepared teams to send them over to Los Angeles to get custody of Tahavur Hussain Rana. Somehow, things have not moved at the pace that India would have wanted. The Department of Justice has also finally cleared it. However, the extradition or deportation is yet to happen. Director National Intelligence, in her capacity, is actually in charge of that entire process also. Remember, this comes under the rubric of anti-terror cooperation and is covered by the anti-terror treaties between India and the United States of America. So one of the strongest requests from the Indian side coming at this moment would be a quick, immediate extradition of Tahavur Hussain Rana, the man by most accounts responsible for the entire conspiracy behind Mumbai 2611, that dastardly terror strike killing nearly 200 Indian and multiple other nationality citizens on Indian soil in Mumbai. So that's a key reason. Another subset of those requests is, unfortunately, during the end of President Biden's term, the large part of the Indian intelligence community was convinced that the Biden administration has somehow become soft on the Khalistani terror, and that Khalistani terror emanating from both Canadian and the American soil has long been glossed over.